Man, I mean, like I was telling you before, man, when I had to call that Red Cross because I had a, so it was someone who I work with, or she used to work with us, and she's still friends with like a lot of people who work in the office, and so today I got the news that so she's originally from Artsakh.
Right.
She moved to Yerevan, and I guess with some of her family members, however many years ago, but it has a brother that stayed in Artsakh and has been living there. Guy's 35 years old. And so they said to me, you know what, Nadig, we haven't heard from such and such brother. It's been over 12 hours. No one can get a hold of him. And so I said, all right, well, let me make some phone calls to find out who from the Red Cross
Hmm.
I can get in touch with. And so I messaged like a bunch of people in my contacts. And I get the number to like one of the head people that's in Goris, right? It's the first major
Yeah.
city once you get into Artsakh, coming from Artsakh into Armenia. And so, man, I'm telling you, man, it was like something you would hear out of the scene in the movie,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
And you're
And
literally living it.
yeah, and I'm
God,
like,
dude, it's
and I want to make sure the name was, pronounced correctly because I
right.
just started to read Armenian again, right? I forgot how to read Armenian many, many years ago. I learned it when I
Yep.
was a kid. And so I learned how to read Armenian again when I officially moved out here about 4 years ago. And so I'm like reading the name in Armenian. I want to make sure I get it correct. And so I finally, I got it correct, and I let the guy know. But in the meantime, once I figure out the exact enunciation of the first and last name, for a good 1-2 minutes, John, there is so much pandemonium, uh, hoping it's organized chaos.
Yeah.
Just the guys, people on the loudspeaker,
Right. You can just
announcing
hear it
people's
in the
names.
background.
Yeah, I mean, you're hearing this all in the background. It sounded like a scene out of a movie,
Yeah.
and just yelling out people's names. So I tell the guy's name who's missing, and next thing you know, he's on the microphone, like yelling the guy's name out, like David Davidian, like please come to the front. And so, yeah,
Thanks for coming, man. That's why we're doing this shit.
man, I've been crying so much today. It's, Today was hard. Yeah, today was hard, man.
After the last time we talked, I was just like emotionally done the rest of the day just talking about it. And I can't even imagine.
Man, today it just hit me. You know,
I mean, that's fucking real when you're calling looking for people that you've worked with and you can hear the chaos in the background and there's no answer. Like I think that, a lot of people,
this living nightmare.
yeah.
It really is, man. It really is a living nightmare.
Welcome back, everybody. As you can see, Chuck is missing. He's not feeling too good today, but he wanted me to go ahead and do this without him. Earlier this week, we on BDE we had a segment on what was going on in Azerbaijan and in Armenia and Artsakh, and how that was kind of potentially, that geopolitical conflict was kind of impacting the energy side of things and oil and gas prices. And as a Armenian myself, I wanted to take more time to really dive into this because I don't feel like I did it justice in the short little segment that we did. And so I reached out to one of my buddies who is from Philly, but is also Armenian and has been. How long have you been in Armenia now, Nareg? A couple years.
I have been traveling to Armenia for the last 20 years. I've been
Yeah.
involved in the IT sector in the last 10, and I decided to live for the most part here about 5 years ago.
Yeah, so this is my buddy Nareg. We know each other because he works for a big developer shop out of Armenia and Yerevan called Prisma. But I wanted to get him on to really give, kind of a deeper dive into this. And because I mean, it's important to me. No one stateside is talking about it, which is just, right now I've been watching the news the last few days just to see if I could see any kind of even one, 30-second, 1 minute clip of it. And everything right now is about, the shutdown of the Fed or the indictment of this or the accusations of that. and it's very distracting in my opinion, as far as just the things that are going on globally. But it's not being talked about anywhere, whether it's local news, CNN, MSNBC. Pretty much no one stateside is talking about it, and I find that ridiculous. But again, all of this ties back to the energy side of things, and we'll kind of get into that in a minute. So we'll just jump in. Nareg,
yes.
Let's kind of lay the foundation a little bit for people who don't know. Most people don't have any idea where Armenia even is on a map, and so. But I do think, as we kind of discussed prior, the geography and some of the maps and stuff of this area are very important. It helps people kind of understand things. And so can you kind of give us a little bit of a background on kind of everything going on right now? And while you do that, I'm going to pull up some maps that you can talk over.
Thanks for having me on the show today. A lot of what's been happening in this region definitely has a tie in the oil business. And so when we were in touch about, this kind of reconnecting and explaining to you what's been happening in this region, I thought it was great when you asked me to come on your show and to talk a little bit more about just a little bit about the history and what's been happening in this region and why it's happening. So I would say starting about 9 months ago, Azerbaijan put a roadblock basically on the road that goes in and out of Armenia. And Artsakh, also known as Nagorno-Karabakh, it's dependent on Armenia in many ways, one of them being common goods, food, medication, stuff like this. And
yeah, a lot of people I don't think understand that, because Artsakh is a kind of standalone Caucasus republic, that most of their food, medicine, even energy is imported through this little purple spot on this map right here, which is where the blockade has been for the last 9-10 months. I actually recently also even read reports that Azerbaijan was also intermittently and sporadically cutting gas supply to that area as well. It's just even further.
Gas, electricity.
Yeah, right. So yes, that's what I mean when I say gas, natural gas supplying power plants, which means that the electricity also then goes out. And so these people, most people don't understand that this has been going on for almost a year, but they've essentially starved and deprived this region to the point that, in my opinion, Azer felt that they were weak enough that they could move in and take it over.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, after 9 months of really starving these people, they decided to start attacking us. And after, if I'm not mistaken, 1 or 2 days of attacking, the Republic of Artsakh decided to
concede.
That's the word I'm looking for, exactly. And after that has happened, up until now, it's more or less has been a living nightmare, not just for Armenians and Artsakh in Armenia, but even Armenians all around the world, and even anybody who cares at the smallest degree talking about humanitarian issues and humanitarian crisis, because it's a huge humanitarian crisis. As of right now, the last reports I've read, of the 120,000 population of Artsakh, we have about a little bit over 50,000 that have entered into Armenia. There are several people in the hundreds, if not the thousands by now, who are missing. Several men are missing.
I saw they arrested the former president while he was trying to evacuate as well.
He was
prime minister,
a statesman. His name is Ruben Vartanyan. And so he also has been playing a significant role fighting for the Armenian cause, working on different nonprofit initiatives over the years, I've actually had a chance to meet him on a couple of occasions. Very good guy, and he loves Armenia. He loves Artsakh. He knows that this is our ancient, historical Armenian land,
Yeah.
and so he put it up to his responsibility to do what he's been doing. And now, if I'm not mistaken, they gave him the sentence, if I'm not mistaken, of I believe it's up to 14 years in jail. So it's still a lot of movement happening.
Yeah.
Whether that's going to stick or not, nobody knows.
Right. It definitely seems as though they're, following kind of historical practices of rounding up people that were pushing for freedom and independence of the region, and anybody that was going against what Azer would want.
Azerbaijan,
and that is incredibly similar to the original genocide back in the during World War I, when they rounded up all the women and children and sent them on a death march through the Syrian desert and imprisoned all the old men, and then either massively executed or worked the young men to death. And so I think that's the biggest thing here is us as, every Armenian around the world. It's very hard to describe. I've never been to Armenia. I have no known family members living in Armenia. But when the more I pay attention to this, the more I dig into this, the more I hear about it, it affects me at my core. Like there's a theory that DNA has memory, and I've never been more sure of that in my life because of the Armenian history that I've got. Anything that comes up, even just the anniversary of the genocide, it's a very emotional, heavy day for me every single year. And so seeing this shit happen in 2023, while we're sending billions of dollars in aid to Ukraine for effectively a very similar situation, is incredible. It's very sad.
And your grandparents also survived the genocide. Yep. Just like how my grandparents did. Now my dad's side, they're all their family members got decimated except my father's dad. To give some context, it's crazy hearing those stories growing up, and now I'm living in a region where 100 miles away from me, to the east, the same exact thing is happening that happened literally 100 years ago. So for me, it's just a different effect I get, being here and, being in the midst of all this.
Yeah, no, I was driving home the other day after we initially talked, and the 100 miles statement, popped into my head, and I was like, the big loop in Houston is 100 miles around. Right. And it just goes around the circumference of Houston, just to put, the distance of this in perspective for the average person. It is in his backyard right now.
Yeah. It's very, very close to Yerevan, where I'm at. And, the last time we talked, you mentioned an interesting point, how a lot of these post-Soviet countries, they look like puzzle pieces.
Yep.
And, a lot of that model is the divide and conquer model. Hitler did it. Soviet Union was doing it.
Yeah, Stalin did it. The British Empire did it with all the colonies.
Exactly. Yeah, and so
just looking at this map for just for the normal person, so you understand this. This is all Armenia in red. This yellow and orange is also technically still Armenia, but then they carved out this little corner of what used to be Armenia for Azerbaijan, and then put these kind of Caucasus and independent republics in the middle, just so that there would intentionally be conflict. It's the equivalent of redistricting, your voting districts in the United States that everybody complains about. But this is intended to always have conflict so that whoever the reigning empire is doesn't have to worry about them, because if they're fighting each other, they're not fighting us.
Yeah, and just to add one more point on top of that, John, it's a win-win situation for Russia, right? So in their case is that, okay, if I come and get involved in the situation and bring peace, then me being Russia as a country, then I have to benefit out of the deal.
Yep.
Now, if I don't get involved and if I don't bring peace, then I'm going to go ahead and sell you guys weapons. You're both going to buy them off of me, and you guys would go and kill each other, and you're going to keep buying weapons off of me. So for Russia as a country, they're going to benefit either way in the deal.
Yeah.
And this is what they've done in several parts of the post-Soviet Union region.
Absolutely.
It's the writings on the wall. It's just the strategy they've been using.
Yeah. No, I want to bring this up real quick just so we can get a little bit of the history in. Armenia is one of the oldest nations in the world, and it's the first and oldest Christian nation in the world. But as you can see by this map, where it stretches from the Mediterranean all the way to the Caspian, almost all the way to the Black Sea on the north side, down to what it looks like after World War I in 1919, to that map that I was just showing you, where it's now this tiny little sliver. And it's hard to get the context because it's zoomed in a little bit, but there is no debate based off of history that Artsakh and most of these regions in quote unquote question have always been part of Armenia. The populations are 90+%, 95% Armenian. And again, this was very much so, in my opinion, designed by Stalin during the Soviet Union era so that there would continuously be conflict there. And that's exactly what's happened for pretty much the last 100 years.
Yeah, it's a couple of countries. I read that the Brits, also get the blame for this too. Coming in during World War I and this drawing lines of saying, okay, this is your land, that's your lands. I don't want to address these points to play the blame game at all. It's just that historically this is what happens, and as powers changed in this region more and more, especially if you look about the history in the last 100 years, the power exchanges that happen in this region of the world has turned around so many times. And the bottom line for Armenia is that, were we the size of what's half of Turkey right now? Absolutely. Is there historical lands in Turkey that were Armenian historical lands? Absolutely there are. Absolutely. And it's all documented. To see this happening now in a region that was, even during the Soviet times, and I'm speaking about Artsakh now, Nagorno-Karabakh, with the minimum of 90% native Armenians that were native to that land that had been living there and their families for hundreds of years. It's absolutely crazy that, you have a nomadic people, Turkish people and Azerbaijani. These people are nomads, okay? Coca-Cola is older as a company, older than Azerbaijan, to give some context.
Right. I was going to say this doesn't even appear as any sort of remotely contested region on a map until post World War I. And so it's the eastern part, the Artsakh and the some of the Caucasus over there. But that's the craziest part to me, is that the claims by Azer the last 30 or so years have been, well, this is our land, so on and so forth. But it's like, it's very clearly not, just based off even maps outside of the ones that the Armenians drew show that that's part of Armenia. And then you take it a step further and you look at the little part that's carved out. I'm not even going to try and say that, and it's
totally fine.
I'll butcher it, but you see that it's set up for intentional conflict, so to speak. I think trying to tie this back a little bit now that we've kind of laid some foundation, the big reason, one of the primary reasons, in my opinion, for all of this is because of these pipelines. So
yes,
you can see here, as most people in the energy space know, Baku is one of the prolific one of the most prolific oil fields in the entire world. And so Azerbaijan, since they came to be a country after the Soviet Union, has come into great wealth because they have oil and natural gas resources. And in addition to that, over the years, they've also had an alliance with Turkey, who is also a NATO member, by the way, which I want to make sure I point that out while all of these human atrocities are going on. Turkey has been backing Azerbaijan and arming them because Turkey wants access to oil and natural gas outside of Russia, which has historically been their primary option. And so, as you can see, these different, the Baku pipeline, the BTC pipeline, the South Caucasus pipeline, they all run very conveniently directly around the neighbor that they have conflict with as well, by the way, which out of the gate, I believe, was highly contested when they were originally building and planning these pipelines. As you can tell, it directly cuts around to the point that it's probably significantly more expensive for them to route it all the way around Armenia. But
absolutely.
But that was the entire point, is they didn't want it to go through Armenia because they wanted that to be another lever for control. So the ultimate end goal, though, that Armenians are even more worried about, beyond the fact that hundreds of thousands of people are now being forcibly removed from their homeland with nothing, is that what's to keep them from just coming through and cutting off the southern half of Armenia and joining Azer and that little Azer territory right there, so that they can have a direct path. I believe they've discussed plans for like a train and additional pipelines and stuff once they can get these connected over here directly to Turkey. And so wrapping all of this back to, digital wildcatters and what we do on the energy side is a lot of this is, I mean, there's other factors here, but a lot of this is driven by energy resources and access to oil and gas.
Yeah, they basically want to, as you mentioned, they basically want to take over. Ultimately, the goal is, one of the goals of all these conflicts that has been happening. One, they want to, and it's very clear now, they want to eliminate Armenians completely out of the region. That was the goal that their grandparents put in place 100 years ago. And their goal is to definitely wipe out all the Armenians off the face of the earth, especially in that region. It's probably one of the most racist regimes in the entire planet.
They're talking about their plans in their news. That's the craziest part.
It is,
it's
right?
in the public. It's in the public. It's not like it's these secret documents that got leaked or anything. They're talking about it on major public media. And then anybody that wants to say, well, they're just taking over the territory, it's not genocide or whatever. They are literally destroying all of these Armenian historical artifacts in Artsakh as we speak. There's videos of that on the internet as well. And that's part of
high officials are saying these statements like, we're going to take over. We want to kill the Armenians. They're saying it publicly.
Yeah. And that's the other big thing, though, is like, it's one thing to, forcibly move people, to remove them, to starve them and all of those things. It is a whole nother thing to intentionally go in and destroy hundreds, if not 1,000-year-old pieces of culture, art, and history in a region because it is Christian and you're a Muslim country and you're taking over and you want to literally erase the memory of these people here from the planet.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point you say that. And just to kind of put a little bit of closure of the second part of the point I was trying to make was that definitely by taking over the southeastern region of Armenia, which again they have been saying this publicly for some time now, they're essentially cutting out the middleman, right? Yep. So they could go ahead and run the pipeline from Azerbaijan to their brother country, whatever they call each other, right into Turkey, where they could, in addition, maximize more profits, and they don't have to worry about a pipeline going through, let's say, Georgia or Russia, where these countries have the power to shut off the spigot, at any moment they want what they want to. So that's another point I wanted to address of why all this has been happening, so they can have just a direct connection from Azerbaijan to Turkey to run their oil pipeline.
Yeah, and I want to show people while we're talking about that. Here is the current pipeline beyond just the Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Turkey area, you can see lots of this is going directly to Turkey and also all the way over to the EU, which is why this is even more interesting and probably why we aren't hearing many people talk about it from a geopolitical perspective. In my hypothesis is that we've got all these sanctions on Russia because of the Ukraine. And this is, I believe I read that the oil supply from the BTC pipeline supplies the EU with roughly 7% of their oil, which is not insignificant, especially as they are essentially trying to eliminate their ability or buying oil from Russia directly. And so that's where I think this gets really, really obvious as far as no one talking about it, no world leaders talking about it, nobody mentioning it. The fact that the U.S. has been, backing Turkey, we have multiple times broken an agreement after from the 1990s where we said we would sanction Azerbaijan and we would not give them the U.S. being we would not give them aid or funding. We've done that multiple times since then, and no one's talking about it. Nobody wants to call a spade, and that's what we're here to do.
Yeah. It's it's interesting, and for people to think that if a pipeline was to be successfully run through the southern part from Baku, going through Azerbaijan directly into Turkey, I mean, for people to think that Russia doesn't have a part, and that's also we're not to benefit from that kind of deal as well. I mean, these people are crazy, to not have any belief in that. Russia definitely has their hands involved, and in my opinion, anything that goes on in the post-Soviet countries,
for sure,
one way or another, they have their hands involved. And so I just wanted to address that point as well.
Yeah, no, it's again, when you start looking at it on a map, that's why I had these kind of queued up. It really starts to make a lot of sense, right? I mean, as we saw with Russia and the Ukraine, no one will publicly say who blew up that pipeline from. I don't even remember what body of water that was in, but I believe it was somewhere in here or in the Black Sea. But that was most definitely a strategic military move, right? I mean, energy resources are incredibly important, as we continuously preach on most of our podcasts and shows, and to this point that you can literally use them to as leverage to force people out of countries and force your will onto not just countries but the world, because there's so much of the world that has interest in having access to these resources outside of Russia and all of that fun stuff. So the energy resources in this area are vital, not just to the local region around Turkey and Azerbaijan, but also all the way out, to the EU and a lot of other countries. And so I started doing a little bit of research, and I looked up who the primary equity owners are in the oil pipeline. I believe we said on Monday that pipeline carries like 1 million barrels a day through it. And just to name a few, the biggest shareholder is BP. Murray Auchincloss, the CEO of BP. I'm talking to you. Equinor, Anders Opedal, Eni, Claudio Descalzi, and Total, Patrick Pouyan. I know I butchered that, but I've never taken a day of French in my life. But I'll speak directly to Total. Your country is one of the only countries that has actually stepped up and is starting to do something and pushing for sanctions against Azerbaijan, France, amazingly. But, I find it interesting that if any of those companies decided that they disagreed with what was going on, they probably have a lot more power than Azer does, in effect, if they were to, say, hey, we don't agree with this, we're going to shut down production, or we're going to shut down the transportation into this pipeline. Yet none of that has happened yet. So I also thought it would be interesting, after being forced to forced into a lot of the ESG stuff that most public companies have been forced into over the last 5 or so years. I thought it would be interesting to kind of investigate a little bit of what that looks like. And so I'm going to pull something up real quick.
While you do that, John, and it's a great point you mentioned, I would say, between these companies that you mentioned, as well as Azerbaijan, these guys spend millions of dollars every year lobbying, influencing the media, and it's actually one reason why no one really has been hearing about what has been happening in the last 9 months when this humanitarian crisis started in Artsakh. The media wasn't talking about it. I had a conversation recently about somebody talking about shadow banning on the social media. If people are advocating about anything Armenia or Artsakh related, it's becoming questionable of how much that visibility has been seen or has not been seen. As shadow banning and the knowledge of this is becoming more and more to the public, with some of these major tech companies. Yeah. And it's no surprise at all, too. I'm sure these big oil companies and Azerbaijan and Turkey, they also have an influence to these major tech companies as well, too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, we've seen plenty of evidence of that stateside for lesser things. So it would not be surprising at all. So like I said, I wanted to pull up some of the ESG statements from the companies that have equity or majority interest in these pipelines. I found, this is BP's, so you can see by the URL there, but I find a few of these rather fascinating. We recognize our responsibility to respect human rights and avoid complicity in human rights abuses as stated in the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights and reiterated in the Rights chapter of the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. This one's my personal favorite. We respect the human rights of people and communities that may be affected by our activities. They've been so worried about climate, which is much slower moving than, say, war or genocide, that it is mind-blowing to me that these companies who absolutely have the ability to influence what is going on in this region have been dead silent. I mean, come on, guys. Like, if you guys actually believe in all this ESG stuff and you want to push this, and that's what you guys truly believe, why aren't we doing it? Why are you not saying anything about this right now?
I think as a human race, especially in the 21st century, we really need to draw the line. If you're talking about human lives and profit, it comes to a point where how much fucking money does a company need to make? Are your profits that much more important over people being driven away from their homeland, their native land?
I mean, just the fact that the pipeline was routed how it was initially routed clearly shows like there was a problem with that out of the gate, right? Like, we're going to intentionally circumvent this country, making it more expensive to develop the actual pipeline so that we could have, another lever in negotiations long-term and ultimately more power. But the fact that, BP, Shell, Equinor, Eni, Total, to name a few that have interests in these pipelines, are completely silent on this is sad, as someone who's spent over a decade in the industry and absolutely tries to do everything he can to promote all the good things that we do bring. This is a really sad thing.
It is a sad thing, and by all means, I'm no political analyst. As a matter of fact, that I'm actually not good at doing these types of interviews. I'm mostly someone that's behind the scenes. How great would it be? And again, I don't know if this is a good idea or a bad idea, where, some of these CEOs, these companies you mentioned that are, technically a part of this whole entire thing, how great could it be that, they could come out as heroes, right? And facilitate this whole entire situation to really bring peace in the area. Yeah. If they have so much money and so much influence, how great would it be that it'll be such a great example to the world? And like I said before, it's the 21st century. the line needs to be drawn,
Absolutely.
when it comes, we're talking about human lives and profit over exporting oil.
Yeah. No, here's a even better idea. I know there's a lot of geopolitical issues that go into this. It's a lot more gray than black and white. But here's a really easy one to all of those oil and gas companies that I just mentioned. Put something in place that says you will not build any pipelines from Azer across what is currently Armenia into Turkey on the southern or eastern side. Do it and stick to it.
And you know what's another interesting point, John? The leaders of these countries, they're dictators. Yeah. We've seen in the history what has happened to dictators, right? Yep. We've seen that. The West really stood up against dictators.
And the fighting in Artsakh has been happening for 30 plus years now, right? Or even longer.
It's been much more heated up, absolutely. Yeah. When the Soviet Union was starting to break apart, that's when things really started to get heated up again. But to me, it's just, again, one of those ironies that you have dictator-driven countries that are not being punished at all. We were able to go ahead. Yeah.
Even supported in many cases by the U.S. and other countries like Turkey and Azer.
Yeah. It's interesting. Just to add one more quick point, this is somewhat related. I read in the news that USA provided Armenia the people of Artsakh, which is about roughly a population of 120,000. They committed to give $11.5 million, which comes to about $95 a person.
Yeah.
To me, I mean,
what a slap in the face with all the Ukrainian bullshit going on. We're misplacing billions of dollars, conveniently enough, for that war, but this war where you have the ability to have so much influence, we're basically getting the U.S. equivalent of thoughts and prayers, right? Like we condemn this and they should stop, but here's some money and we're not gonna talk about it. We're not gonna put it on the news. We're not gonna bring any kind of light to it. We're not gonna implement any sanctions. Like, I mean that it's I'm very disappointed to be an American during a time like this because of how ridiculous the lack of involvement, the lack of policy. I mean, we've lost our backbone in a lot of rights.
It's interesting. Samantha Powers, which if I'm not mistaken, she leads the head of the U.S. aid. Yeah. So she was in Armenia here 2 days ago, and there's so much documentation that what has been happening in the past week is genocide.
Yeah.
She still played the game of politics with all the evidence out there. Yep. And this is even evidence that Azeri soldiers are posting.
Right. Online. They're not being secretive about it at all.
They are literally cutting off people's heads. It doesn't matter if they're a child, if they're a woman, a man, a senior. They are literally cutting off. I mean, I don't even want to get into details. It's so gruesome. Yeah.
It's not hard to find. If you guys don't believe us, go on Twitter, look up #Artsakh Armenian genocide. I mean, it's there, and it's not difficult to find.
Yeah, Telegram channels. You could go into Azeri Telegram channels that are open to the public, and you'll see all the information there. They're bragging about it.
Yeah,
almost as if like, you know what, we have been getting away with so much. Who cares? We could just keep sharing this stuff and keep getting away with it because nobody's doing nothing. So yeah, it's quite serious. She made a point that, we need to physically go in, and see what's going on, which again, it's a bunch of bullshit politics.
Yeah.
And so right now, the clock's ticking to see what's going to happen on that front.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. You need to go in and see proof about some of these claims, of atrocities. I don't think there's any dispute at all that these people are being forced from their homes after a 9-month blockade where they didn't get the resources that they needed to survive. So like, is there any question about that? Is that not enough to start looking at sanctions? A lot of those,
exactly. It's like you starve a population, right? You starve them basically for 9 months.
Yep.
And then now you're going ahead and you're bombing schools, hospitals, apartments, houses where people are living, non-military. Now you're bombing them after starving them for 9 months. And now you're going ahead and having people being forced to leave their homeland where their homes are being forced to leave. You're telling me that's not enough evidence to show that this is genocide? I mean,
or even just to start sanctioning out of the gate, and then
exactly,
like
sanctions definitely need to be done. I mean, enough's enough, because you know what? Hitler said it the best. He said, you know what? Of course I can get away with the Holocaust. Look what happened to the Armenians in 1915. You know, the Turks got away with it.
Yep. That's
this has to be stopped in the 21st century. No country, no population should be have to suffer like this. Armenian, non-Armenian, this just has to stop.
Yeah, it's about humans.
Yeah, it really has to stop.
Man, I really appreciate you joining us. I'm gonna have to jump here in a little bit, but wanted to give you a chance just to kind of have a final statement, whatever you want to say to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thanks, John, for having me. If there is demand, I will come back on the show and, make sure I look more presentable.
We're happy to have you on for an update. Hopefully there's good things to talk about in the future.
It's, when there's crisis happening, and I've been dealing with a lot of crisis and what's been happening here, and especially in the last week, I think one of the most important things is to find room to have humor and have a couple laughs. You can't just be mourning and be sad in any crisis someone's experiencing. If you don't find those moments of being positive, it could really set things for a real downhill slide. Regarding final thoughts, depending on where you are in the world, if you're Armenian, if you're not Armenian, if you're someone that believes in human rights and the right to live freely, especially if they are from their homeland, I would like to have your audience to contact your state representatives. Let them know that you know what's happening in Artsakh. Let them know that the evidence is online. You have been learning about this is a clear genocide that's happening to the Armenians again. It's we always thought that this is the 21st century, and as Armenians we said, if there was the internet, maybe
never happened. Right?
Yeah, people would say that, if this was 100 years ago, if we had the internet back then, maybe the Armenian genocide would never have happened. Now it's the 21st century. We have the internet, and we see that that's not true. So
they're on it, bragging about it.
Yeah, they're bragging about it.
They're not even trying to hide it.
Yeah, and that's another thing that doesn't even help me go to sleep at night knowing that.
No.
So I would say, again, as a final thought, if you're out there watching, please educate yourself more about the situation. Contact your state representatives. Let them know what's happening. Let them know you want justice. We need to draw a line of sanctioning countries, punishing leaders when they're doing stuff like causing genocide, and to make a very good point that the world will not tolerate this kind of behavior.
Yeah, I'm gonna continue with you on that. Another thing I want to add to that is post, share, repost. No one is talking about this, and that is the craziest part about it. The more people that we have talking about it, the more pressure we can put on politicians to actually get off their ass and do something.
Absolutely.
On top of that, up.
Yeah, this is not an Armenian issue. This is a human rights issue.
Yeah,
because I want to tell you, If nothing's done about this, I'm going to tell you it's going to happen again. It's going to happen
going.
again. It's going to keep repeating, and one day it's going to be, one of your views is someone watching their nationality, their peoples. Yep. This could happen too. This is something that needs to be stopped as soon as possible. The world should have no tolerance. Sanction the shit out of these fucking countries.
BP, Equinor, Eni, Total. We're talking to you. You guys honestly have probably the most power in this entire scenario. It goes directly against every single ESG policy you have around human rights. What is happening in Artsakh and Armenia right now? Please do not stand by and watch this happen. You guys have the ability to sanction. You guys have the ability to shut down operations. And I can almost guarantee you that's probably the biggest lever that we've got at this point in time. Nareg, thank you so much for coming on. We will definitely have you on again to do an update. Chuck, thanks for letting us do this. Everybody out there watching, listening, like we're talking about, please reach out to your senators, your representatives, and talk about it, post about it, share, retweet, everything. There are literally people being killed because of their ethnicity, being forced from their homes in 2023, and it has made no national news at all. It's insane. Nareg, appreciate it, man.
Thanks so much, buddy. John. Thank
you. Stay strong. I know you're dealing with a lot.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.